Congratulations on purchasing a new Hallmaster custom 5x10 utility trailer. In this video, we'll walk you through how to assemble your trailer so you can enjoy it for years to come. Before unpacking the trailer contents, first open the attached envelope to retrieve your trailer registration. Save this in a safe place. Unpack all of the trailer components and lay light components out together on a large, flat, and level surface. Each part has a unique ID number that matches the instructions in the owner's manual. Pay close attention to these numbers as many parts look similar. Lay out the front and rear side rails as shown and place 4 cross members in between them temporarily for spacing. Position the side rails with harness holes on the driver's side oriented to be on the bottom of the assembly as shown. Then place the driver and passenger side shackles as shown. Lay out the front, middle, and rear wiring harnesses around the side rails as shown. Starting with the yellow taped end, insert the middle wiring harness into the front side rail with harness holes and feed the harness along the side rail. Leave 6 inches free at the front end with the 4 connectors. On the rear end, feed the end of the middle wiring harness with 2 connectors through the hole at the rear one at a time. Then feed the yellow taped end through the hole in the middle of the rear side rail. Align the front and rear side rails so that the ends join together in line with the alignment triangle on the shackle. Next, you'll be positioning 12 rail nut assemblies around the joint of each side rail. To make a rail nut assembly, slide a rail nut into a rail nut holder with a grooved pattern on the rail nut facing the inside of the rail nut holder. To install the rail nut assembly into a side rail, insert the rail nut into the rail with the rail nut holder resting flush against the rail. Rotate the rail nut assembly 90 degrees to align the rail nut to the rails. You'll follow this process anywhere a rail nut assembly is required. Position 12 rail nut assemblies around the joint of each side rail as shown, matching the hole pattern on the shackle. Place the driver side shackle over the side rail joints with the rail nuts aligned to the shackle holes. If needed, you may use a screwdriver to move the rail nuts to the desired position. Ensure that the shackle is oriented such that the rail with the wiring harness is on the same side as the brackets on the shackle. Loosely secure the shackle with 12 3/8 bolts, each with a spring washer and a flat washer. Verify the front and rear rails are still meeting at the center of the alignment triangle on the shackle. Tighten the front 3 bolts on the inside of the shackle to 25 foot-pounds. On the rail that was tightened, measure the distance from the front of the shackle to the end of the rail. Repeat the measurement on the other front rail that is not tightened. Shift the rail that is loose until it measures the same from the shackle to the end as the tightened rail. Then tighten the 3 bolts on that rail to 25 foot-pounds. Repeat this process with the other front rails, ensuring that the front rails on both the driver and passenger side measure the same from the end of the shackle to the front of the front rail. All 4 front rails should now be set at the same distance from end to shackle, and all 6 bolts on both the driver and passenger side shackles should be torqued to 25 foot-pounds. Lightly tap all rear rails to seat them against the front rails. Torque the remaining 6 bolts on each side to 25 foot-pounds. Remove the 4 cross members that were used as spacers. Place an object under each shackle to angle the assembly from the floor with the shackle bracket side lifted up. Place a rail nut assembly on each rail 9 inches from the end. Fasten an assembly stand with the T section of the stand on the same side as the shackle brackets. Secure with 2 3/8 bolts and flat washers and tighten. These will be removed later in the assembly process. Repeat this at each end of the rails. Stand up each rail assembly. Squaring up the side rails will make the next assembly steps much easier. Start by positioning the rails 5 feet apart when measuring from outside to outside. Measure diagonally from each corner and adjust the rail positions until they measure an equal distance apart diagonally while maintaining an even 5-foot spacing side to side. Place a 1/4 inch flat washer on a 1/4 inch bolt, then insert through the outside of a corner bracket and through an inner crossmember bracket. On the other side, put a 1/4 inch flat washer and a 1/4 inch lock nut. Repeat for the other hole on the corner bracket assembly. Repeat this to create 4 corner bracket assemblies. Assemble 2 in a right-hand orientation and 2 in a left-hand orientation as shown. Place 2 rail nut assemblies into each end of each front bumper rail. Rotate one front bumper rail so that the rail nuts are facing forward and position left and right-handed corner bracket assemblies on either end as shown. The 1/4 inch bolt heads should be facing outwards. Use 4 3/8 bolts, each with a spring washer and a square washer, to loosely connect to the lower front bumper rail. Slide the corner bracket assembly to fit snug against the front bumper rail. Repeat these steps for a top front bumper rail and tighten the 3/8 bolts on the front bumper rail assembly to 25 foot-pounds. At this point, the square washers will be misaligned. This will be corrected with the included square washer wrench at a later step. On the front end of the front side rails, insert 2 rail nut assemblies on each rail and align them to the corner bracket holes. Lift the front bumper assembly and set it into the front side rails with the tabs on the corner brackets holding it in place. The top of the front side rails should be even with the top of the front bumper, and the ends of the front side rails should be touching the bumper. Secure the side rails to the front rail assembly with 4 3/8 bolts, spring washers, and square washers. Tighten to 25 foot-pounds. Repeat this process for the rear bumper. Repeat the diagonal measurements and adjust the frame until both diagonal measurements are equal to ensure the frame is square. Place both tongues and coupler upside down and aligned as shown, lining up the mounting holes. Place a 3/8 bolt with a flat washer from the outside of the coupler into the forwardmost holes on the ends of the tongues. Place another flat washer on each bolt on the inside of the coupler. Attach the chain link end of each safety chain to the innermost bolts using an additional flat washer and 3/8 nut on each. Place a 3/8 bolt and flat washer through the second hole on each tongue, then place another flat washer and 3/8 nut on each and torque all 4 bolts to 25 foot-pounds. Turn the coupler assembly over and insert the coupler jack through the top of the coupler. Rotate the jack until the 3 holes on the mounting plate align with the holes on the coupler assembly. Secure the coupler jack with 3 3/8 bolts with spring washers and flat washers. Torque to 25 foot-pounds. Bolt the lower jack plate to 3 of the 4 holes on the underside of the tongues, leaving the rearward driver side hole open. Use 3 1/4-inch bolts, each with a 1/4-inch flat washer, top and bottom, and a 1/4-inch nut on the inside. Torque all bolts to 10 foot-pounds. Remove the pin from the jack foot plate. Place the jack foot plate onto the bottom of the jack and secure it in place with the pin. Place the tongue assembly at the front of the trailer. Use the jack to raise the coupler end of the assembly until it is at the same height as the bottom of the trailer frame. Place the passenger side tongue bracket 23 inches from the front of the side rail on the passenger side of the trailer. Using the bracket as a guide, place 4 rail nut assemblies in the front side rails so that they align with the holes in the tongue bracket. Use 4 3/8 bolts, each with a spring washer and a square washer, to secure the side tongue bracket to the side rails. Make sure the bracket is flush with the bottom rail and torque all bolts to 25 foot-pounds. Repeat on the opposite side with the driver's side tongue bracket. Use 2 clamps to position the tongue assembly to the trailer and clamp it in place. The side tongue brackets should be on the outside of the tongue on both sides. Use 8 3/8 bolts, each with a flat washer on either side of the tongue and a lock nut on the inside to secure both side tongue brackets to the tongues. Make sure the brackets are flush with the bottom rail. Torque all bolts to 25 foot-pounds. Place the passenger front tongue bracket onto the trailer and align the holes on the bracket to the holes on the tongue. Using the bracket as a guide, insert 4 rail nut assemblies into the front rails. Use 4 3/8 bolts, each with a spring washer and square washer, to secure the front tongue bracket to the front rails. Make sure the bracket is flush with the bottom rail. Torque all bolts to 25 foot-pounds. Repeat with the driver front tongue bracket on the driver side of the trailer. Use 2 3/8 bolts, each with a flat washer and 3/8 lock nut, to secure the passenger front tongue bracket to the passenger side tongue. Tighten until just snug. Repeat on the driver side. Measure and mark the center of the coupler. Measure from the front end of each shackle to the center of the coupler and verify the tongue is square to the axle. If the measurements are not equal, loosen the tongue bracket mounting bolts. Adjust the tongue position and retighten the bolts. Verify the shackle to coupler measurements are equal before proceeding. Tighten the bolts on the front tongue brackets to 25 foot-pounds. Attach an inner crossmember bracket with the bulge facing upwards to the inside of both side tongue brackets and side shackles, and secure with 2 1/4-inch bolts, each with a 1/4-inch flat washer on either side and a 1/4-inch lock nut. Finger tighten. Attach an inner crossmember bracket to all 5 outer crossmember brackets using 2 1/4-inch bolts per bracket. Use a flat washer on either side of the brackets and a lock nut on the inside. Finger tighten. Place all outer crossmember bracket assemblies in the locations shown and secure with 4 rail nut assemblies, 3/8 bolts, spring washers, and square washers each. Finger tighten the bolts. Verify the positions of all crossmember brackets, measuring from the spot indicated on each bracket. Torque all 1/4-inch bolts to 10 foot-pounds and all 3/8 bolts to 25 foot-pounds. Place rail nut assemblies in each end of 5 crossmembers. Place the crossmembers on the inner crossmember brackets one at a time, starting at the front and working rearwards. It's recommended to save the installation of the crossmembers at the front and rear bumpers until after step 99. We'll show that installation later in this video. Secure the crossmembers with a 3/8 bolt, spring washer, and flat washer on each end. Verify that each crossmember position matches the positions identified in step 64 before torquing. Torque all 3/8 bolts to 25 foot-pounds. Before proceeding, verify that all 1/4-inch bolts have been torqued to 10 foot-pounds and all 3/8 bolts have been torqued to 25 foot-pounds. Use the provided square washer wrench to align the square washers as needed when torquing. Carefully remove the wrapping from the ends of the axle and be sure to locate the cotter pins and set them aside. Place a leaf spring on one end of the axle, fitting the alignment nub on the leaf spring into the bracket hole on the axle. Place the axle plate over the leaf spring, then place the U-bolts around the axle and secure with lock nuts, leaving them finger tight. Repeat for the other leaf spring at the other end of the axle, making sure that the metal strap on each end faces the same direction. Tighten the lock nuts on the U-bolts in a cross pattern to 25 foot-pounds. Measure diagonally from the tip of each leaf spring and adjust until the diagonal measurements are the same. Place the axle assembly underneath the trailer with the metal strap on each leaf spring facing forward. Lift the front of the axle assembly into the forward shackle bracket and secure with a 9/16 long bolt and a 9/16 lock nut. Finger tighten. Make sure the lock nut is positioned so that the triangular markings are facing away from the bolt head. Repeat on the other side. It may be necessary to use a dead blow hammer to align the springs so they fit into the shackles. Secure 2 shackle links to the rear bracket on each shackle using 9/16 long bolts and 9/16 lock nuts. Swing the leaf springs up and align them into the shackle links. Fasten them with 9/16 long bolts and 9/16 lock nuts. Tighten each bolt and nut holding the shackle links and leaf springs to the shackle brackets until the nut is snug against the shackle links in the rear and snug against the shackle bracket in the front. Remove the cotter pin, if installed, and castle nut from each end of the axle. Note the location of the cotter pin hole. With a flathead screwdriver and hammer or mallet, carefully remove the dust cap on each wheel hub. Raise the trailer by rotating the jack handle approximately 16 turns to make clearance for the wheels. Place the wheel hub assembly on the axle. Reinstall the castle nut and tighten until the wheel only completes 1 to 2 rotations after a hard spin. Align the castle nut with the hole in the axle and install the cotter pin. Using needle nose pliers, bend the ends of the cotter pin around the castle nut. Reinstall the dust cap by tapping it into place with a mallet. Remove each wheel's 5 lug nuts and take the wheel off the hub. On the passenger side, position a right fender bracket on the lower front side rail so that the rear end of the bracket is flush with the front end of the shackle. Insert rail nut assemblies into the front side rail aligned with the holes in the bracket and secure the bracket with 2 3/8 bolts, spring washers, and flat washers. Torque the bolts to 25 foot-pounds. Keep the bracket level with the rail while tightening. Insert 2 rail nut assemblies into the rear lower side rail. Loosely attach a left fender bracket to the lower side rail with 2 3/8 bolts, spring washers, and flat washers, with 2 square washers between the left fender bracket and the side rail as spacers. Measure the distance between the mounting pads on the passenger side fender. Then position the left fender bracket an equal distance from the right fender bracket. Torque the bolts to 25 foot-pounds. Keep the bracket level with the rail while tightening. Repeat this process for the driver's side of the trailer using a left fender bracket on the front of the shackle and a right fender bracket on the rear of the shackle. Set the passenger side fender onto the fender brackets. The reflector on the fender should be facing forwards. Secure the fender with 2 3/8 bolts, 4 flat washers, and 2 3/8 lock nuts. Torque the bolts to 25 foot-pounds. Repeat for the driver's side with the driver's side fender. Reinstall both wheels. Torque the lug nuts in a star pattern to 85 to 90 foot-pounds. To install amber bullet lights at the front of the trailer, pull the grommet back from the light. Insert the wires through the grommet and into the hole. Push the grommet into the hole, then press the light into the grommet. Repeat for the other side of the trailer, then install the red bullet lights at the rear of the trailer using the same process. Connect the rear wiring harness to the bullet lights as shown. Connect white to white and brown to black. Route the wiring harness through the tongue and underneath the coupler. Place the P-clip around the harness and secure it at the open hole on the coupler with a 1/4-inch bolt, flat washer, and lock nut. Torque to 10 foot-pounds. Place the chrome ring on the license plate light so that both yellow lights are visible. Feed the license plate light wiring through the license plate bracket. Then feed the wiring through the opening at the rear of the driver's side fender. Fasten the license plate light and license plate holder to the fender using 2 25mm long screws. To install the taillights, first feed the wiring through the hole in the rear bumper. Secure the taillights to the rear bumper using 2 19mm long screws each. Then plug the taillights into the rear wiring harness. Complete all remaining wiring connections referencing the diagram in the manual. At this point, you can complete the installation of the front and rear crossmembers. Place 3 rail nut assemblies in a crossmember and position the crossmember along the inside of the front rail with the rail nuts facing downward. Ensure the wiring harness is clear of the crossmember. Secure with 3 3/8 bolts, spring washers, and flat washers. Torque to 25 foot-pounds. Repeat for the rear bumper with 2 rail nut assemblies, 3/8 bolts, spring washers, and flat washers. Position the 4 tie-down hooks to the trailer at any desired location and secure each with 2 3/8 bolts, spring washers, flat washers, and rail nut assemblies. Plug all light connections into the wiring harness. Use adhesive strips and self-adhesive zip tie blocks to secure the wiring harness to the trailer. Cut and place all rail caps onto the trailer rails to cover the channel openings. Install red reflectors onto the upper and lower rail caps using screws. Do this on both sides of the trailer as far rearward as possible, and repeat on each side of the rear of the trailer. Repeat for the amber reflectors on each side of the trailer as far forward as possible. Remove the 4 assembly stands from the completed trailer. You can adjust the trailer jack up and down to raise the trailer off the assembly stands for easier removal. If decking is desired, screws are provided. See the owner's manual for more information on the recommended process for installing decking. Your new base trailer is now ready to customize. If you have any questions, please reach out to our customer support team who will be happy to help.